There are stories that pass from generation to generation, carrying with them the weight of time and silence. Mine, however, remained locked deep in my memory, waiting for the right moment to emerge. It was a love that should never have happened, a love that defied the rules, that broke promises, and that haunts me to this day. At the time, I thought I had done what was right, that I had protected my family, but the price I paid was too high. Now, as the years pass, the secrets begin to tighten their chest, as if asking to be revealed. But before we dive into that story, tell us which state you're watching this video from. And if you enjoyed this touching story, don't forget to subscribe. It all started on an ordinary morning, when I received an unexpected letter. It was from my granddaughter, Laura, asking to spend time with me. But what she didn't know, and perhaps could never have imagined, was that her request would bring back memories that I had tried to bury for decades. Laura was the result of betrayal, a secret that her grandfather took to his grave without ever revealing. A secret that, in a way, made me an accomplice, even without me knowing. These memories took me back to a time when I believed love could heal everything. Little by little, reality showed me otherwise. And now, as I prepare for Lara's arrival, I feel like the past is ready to knock on my door once again, like a storm about to break. Lara arrived in the early afternoon, radiant as always. Her eyes sparkled in a way that reminded me so much of myself when I was young, before everything started to fall apart. As she unpacked her bags in the guest room, I watched her silently, thinking about everything she represented without even knowing it. She was the fruit of something I had never confessed to anyone, not even my late husband. As the tea boiled in the kitchen, my thoughts took me back to the past, when I was young, in love and full of hope. I clearly remember the day I met David. No, he wasn't the man I married. But he was the man who changed the course of my life. He had an easy smile, a confidence that captivated me, and I, naive, let myself be carried away by that forbidden feeling. At that time, I was married to Thomas, a good, honest man who never gave me reason to doubt his love for me. And still, something about David pulled me. Like our souls were linked in a way I couldn't explain. It was wrong, I knew, but the desire to be with him consumed me. There was no going back after that first meeting. Now, so many years later, with Lara under the same roof, I felt a mixture of fear and nostalgia. How to tell her that the grandfather she loved so much had been unfaithful? That she herself was part of a secret I didn't know how to carry? At that time, I was lost between duty and desire. Thomas was a good man, always was. He loved me deeply, and so for a long time I thought our marriage was enough. But when David appeared, with his easy smile and his whispered promises, something inside me broke. It wasn't just a matter of physical attraction, it was as if David saw a part of me that I didn't know myself. He awakened something that had been dormant for years. Our relationship started innocently, like so many other stories. Long conversations and looks that lasted a little longer than they should. But it was on an autumn afternoon. With the cold wind cutting through the air, we found ourselves alone for the first time. We were in a distant cafe, far from the eyes of anyone who could recognize us. David held my hand, and in that instant, I knew something would change forever. The world around us disappeared, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was truly seen. I loved Thomas, or at least I believed I did, but what I felt for David was different. It was like a burning flame, a force I couldn't control. I knew I was crossing a line from which there would be no return, but at that moment, nothing else mattered. The weight of my promises, of my marriage. It seemed insignificant compared to the intensity of that feeling. Now, looking at Lara, I think about how a single moment of weakness can alter so many people's lives. She never knew, and may never know, that the love story she so admires between me and Thomas was marked by deep secrets. The months following my first meeting with David were a whirlwind. I tried to keep up appearances, get on with my life with Thomas, but my mind was always somewhere else, always with David. We met in secret, in hidden cafes or out-of-the-way parks. Each encounter brought with it a mixture of guilt and euphoria. As if we were defying the world, even though we knew everything could fall apart at any moment. Thomas never suspected. He trusted me in a way that now, looking back, seems almost cruel. I knew I was betraying him in ways he would never have imagined, but at the same time, I couldn't stop. With each encounter with David, I felt more alive, closer to who I really was. And, paradoxically, it was this same feeling that sank me even deeper into guilt. It was at that time that I discovered I was pregnant. The shock was devastating. The son, of course, was Thomas's. But the weight of my secret encounters with David made the pregnancy even harder to bear. I knew I couldn't continue with that. I decided I needed to get away from David and focus on my family. It was the only right thing to do. When I told David about the pregnancy, he smiled sadly. As if he knew our story was coming to an end. "You need to move on," he said. And I did. I cut all ties with David and focused on my marriage, hoping that the love I felt for Thomas would be enough to erase the memories of that other man. But even after so many years, even with the birth of my children and the passage of time, David never completely left my mind. I thought that, with time, the past would dissipate. I focused on being the perfect wife and mother, trying to forget the moments I shared with David. And for a while, it worked. My life with Thomas is back to normal. He was a good husband, and our children filled my routine with simple, everyday joys. I could almost believe that was enough. But the past has a cruel way of catching up with us. It was on a winter night, many years later, that the first sign that something was wrong appeared. I was sorting through some of Thomas's old papers when I came across a letter. It was a love letter, but not to me. The name on the letter was that of another woman. My heart stopped for a moment. It couldn't be true. Thomas? The man I secretly betrayed for so long now had a secret of his own. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, that perhaps the letter was from an old novel, from before our marriage. But as I read the passionate words, I realized that this didn't make sense. The date on the letter was recent, much more recent than I would like to admit. Thomas had had an affair, and he kept it a secret as well as I kept mine. The impact of this discovery destroyed me. I had spent so many years believing that my secret was the only weight to bear. Now, he knew Thomas kept his too. And worse, the fruit of that relationship was there, in front of me every day. Lara, our granddaughter, was the result of that betrayal. The revelation about Lara left me stunned. I had spent years trying to bury my own secret, believing I was protecting my family. But there I was, faced with a truth I never imagined. The child I loved like my own granddaughter was, in fact, the result of Thomas's infidelity. I felt a mixture of anger, pain and confusion. How could Thomas betray me like that? I thought that, however imperfect our marriage had been, there was a quiet honesty between us. Now our entire story was tainted, and I didn't know how to move forward. Looking at Lara, which has always been my greatest pride, has become an almost unbearable task. But she wasn't to blame. She didn't know anything, and she didn't deserve to be involved in the emotional mess that the past had created. I decided at that moment that I would not reveal the truth to her. Lara would never need to know that the man who raised her as a grandfather was not her real grandfather. The pain of this truth would be mine to bear alone. The days passed slowly, and every conversation with Lara became a challenge. I saw Thomas's traits in her, both in her appearance and in her personality. She was curious, determined, and reminded me of what I once loved about Thomas. Even so, the pain suffocated me. How could I keep looking at her without feeling the weight of that secret? As time passed, the need to confront the past increased. I needed to deal with my feelings about Thomas, about David, and now, this new secret that had consumed me. The tension inside me grew every day. I wanted to confront the past, but I didn't know where to start. David, with whom I had shared that forbidden romance, still loomed large in my thoughts, and now, with the truth about Thomas, it seemed impossible to ignore everything that had happened. My life, which I thought I controlled so well, it was falling apart. One day, while Laura and I were having coffee on the porch, she mentioned something that caught me off guard. "Grandma, I always felt like there was something strange in our family, something that was never said. Have you ever had that feeling?" I almost spilled my cup. Did she know? Could it be that, somehow? Could Laura feel the weight of the secret I carried? I looked at her, trying to hide the panic that was rising inside me. "Why are you saying that, honey?" I asked, keeping my voice as calm as possible. Laura shrugged, looking at the horizon. "I don't know, it's just a feeling. Like not everything is as it seems." My heart raced. Laura was getting closer and closer to the truth, even without knowing it. The guilt suffocated me. I wanted to protect her, but at the same time, I knew she had a right to know where she came from. I'd spent my life hiding secrets, and at that moment, I wondered if it was fair to do the same to her. At the same time, a part of me wanted to tell. I wanted to share the burden, share that truth that had crushed me for so long. But I didn't know if I was ready to face the consequences of all that. Would Laura forgive me? Would she understand? That night, I could barely sleep. Lara's words echoed in my mind, awakening memories and questions that I had been trying to avoid for years. Had the time finally come to tell the truth? But what truth to tell? Thomas's, mine, or both? I was torn between the desire to protect Laura and the weight of the secret I had kept for so long. The next morning, I decided I needed some time to reflect. I left Laura at home and walked to the park I used to frequent when I was young, the same one where, one day, I last met David. With every step, I felt the weight of age and the choices I made. The cool autumn air didn't bring me the same comfort as before, just the feeling that everything was about to fall apart. I sat on a secluded bench, where I used to think about my life when everything was still uncertain. Back then, I had choices to make, but now, it felt like all the choices had already been made. What was left for me was to deal with the consequences. But the consequences, like the memories, do not disappear. They accumulate, layer upon layer, until you can no longer ignore them. As I sat, I felt a familiar presence next to me. As if David's ghost was there with me, reminding me of the broken promises and the mistakes we made. "You need to tell her," a voice in my head whispered. But the fear of losing Lara's love and trust paralyzed me. I returned home determined to make a decision, but whatever I chose to do, I knew my life would never be the same again. When I got home, I found Laura sitting on the couch, absorbed in a book. The glow on his face when he saw me brought a mix of joy and sadness. How could I be the cause of her pain, even if it wasn't clear to her yet? I knew the only way to move forward was to face the truth, but the words felt heavy, stuck in my throat. "Laura," I began, hesitating. She looked up from the book, curious. "Can we talk for a moment?" She nodded and settled down on the sofa, full of anticipation. I had no idea how to start. The memories, the weight of the past, everything seemed to crowd around me, making it difficult to breathe. "Do you remember what you said about feeling like there was something strange in our family?" I asked, trying to find a way to open up. Laura nodded, her expression changing to a mix of concern and interest. "Yes, Grandma. I always felt like there were secrets." The pain intensified in my heart. Sometimes, secrets are hard to carry, even if they are to protect the people we love. She looked at me closely, and I knew the time to reveal everything was approaching. I took a deep breath. "Laura, there are things about your family that you don't know. Things that I never wanted you to know, but that can help you understand who we really are." The expectation in her eyes made me hesitate again. I didn't want to hurt her, but I also didn't want her to carry ignorance like a burden. "There are secrets that come with time, and it's not fair that you are kept apart," I continued. Lara's gaze intensified, and I could see she was ready to listen. I had a relationship with a man named David, long before you were born. And his life, his story, is intertwined with mine in ways I've never been able to explain. The silence that followed was deafening. The impact of my words seemed to reverberate between us, and I knew the truth was about to change everything. The words hung in the air, heavy and charged with emotion. Lara's gaze deepened, as if she was trying to understand not just what I said, but what it meant for both of us. "Grandma, what does this mean?" she asked, her voice shaking a little. The reality of my revelation settled between us, creating an invisible barrier that we never imagined we would need to face. "It means there's a lot more to our family than the stories we tell," I replied, trying to choose my words carefully. "It means I made choices that impacted many people's lives, including yours." She sat back, like he was trying to process everything. "But what about Grandpa Thomas?" His name sounded amidst our dialogue full of secrets. He also had a secret?" I nodded, the pain rising to the surface again. "Yes. And I never knew that the life we built together was marred by betrayals on both sides. The truth. Just like love, it is complicated and often painful." Lara looked at me, her eyes shining with tears that threatened to fall. "I didn't know, Grandma. I just wanted everything to be simple." The frustration in his voice echoed mine. "How I wish things were different. But life is complex. And the secrets we keep can shape us in ways we never expect. You know, darling," I began, in a soft voice, "the choices we make don't define who we are. They teach us, they shape us, and sometimes they lead us to deeper understandings about ourselves and those we love." As he spoke, I realized that the weight I was carrying was starting to dissipate. Revealing the truth was just the first step, and I was ready to face the consequences, not just for myself, but for Lara as well. "Thanks for telling me, Grandma," she said, her voice a little firmer now. "This is all confusing, but I want to understand. I want to know who I am." Relief filled my heart, and as I watched Lara, I realized that despite the pain and confusion, there was also hope. The truth might be a difficult path, but it was also a path to healing. We were about to embark on a new phase of our relationship, where honesty and understanding could bring us closer together. And so, at that moment, I knew that love would always find a way to prevail, even in the most complicated situations.